Peter didn't know where he was. He didn't recognize the flag on the guard's shoulders or the words stamped across the crates behind them. None of that mattered. Someone was about to die in front of him, and his body had known what to do about that since the day a spider changed it forever. The spider sense screamed a half-second before the first trigger pulled. Two mechanical arms shot forward and knocked the rifle skyward, while a spray of webbing sealed every trigger guard shut. A third arm swept low, catching a burst of gunfire meant for the kneeling prisoners and turning it into scorched dust against a shield of steel. The fourth caught a guard sprinting at him from behind someone fast enough that an ordinary person wouldn't have seen him coming. "Okay," Peter said. Execution canceled. Nobody lowered a weapon. "Put them down, now." A guard's arm went molten acid hissing down his sleeve toward the ground. Peter didn't touch it. He webbed the man's elbows behind his back, hoisted him upside down by the ankles, and aimed both dripping hands into an empty drainage ditch until the hissing stopped. Another guard's skin began to glow heat, building in his chest like a lit fuse. Peter wrapped him in 3 tight loops of webbing and threw him into open ground. Then ripped the rear doors off a parked armored truck and webbed them together into a wall between the blast and everyone behind him. The explosion cracked against the steel and died there. A third man strong enough to dent a car door with his fist came in, swinging. Peter caught his wrist, let the momentum finish the job for him, and put him through the side of a guard shack. By then the prisoners were still kneeling, still bound. One mechanical arm swept low and cut every length of chain in a single pass. "Fence is coming down," Peter said, tearing a gap in the wire. "Move." A man helped a woman to her feet, staring at the figure in red and blue, who had just gutted an execution squad without firing a shot. "Who are you?" The nearest camera was still rolling its red light steady. "Spider-Man," Peter said. "Stay behind me until you're clear." He found the security block minutes later, guards webbed to a support beam, and worked his way down a row of locked cells. The first held a heavy-set man who sized him up without flinching. The second held a wiry man, crouched near the bars, already reaching for a loose strand of webbing on the floor. The third held a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You're going to want to hear this before you hit the next building," the young man said, rubbing his wrists once the cuffs came off. "I'm listening," Peter said. "That doesn't mean I trust you yet." "Fair. I'm Huey. That's Mother's Milk. The one already testing your webs is Frenchie." "It is synthetic," Frenchie said, stretching a strand between 2 fingers. "And stronger than the fence you tore down. Please stop pulling on it while people are still attached to buildings," Peter said. In the control room, Peter pulled up every file the terminal would give him. Names, dates, hours of looped footage, the same chair, the same restraints, different faces every time. Some of them looked younger than they should have. "Vought runs the camps," Huey said quietly. "Homelander runs Vought." Peter didn't know yet what kind of man that made him. But anyone who allowed rooms like this to exist had already answered the only question that mattered. A woman in a leather jacket dropped down through the smoke outside a dozen survivors trailing behind her. She set 2 of them gently on the ground and looked at Peter the way people look at something they can't quite place. "You always crash into prison camps without an introduction?" she asked. "This is actually my first one," Peter said. "Annie," she said, "I'll get everyone moving. You keep clearing rooms." It took another 20 minutes to empty the block. Peter checked every cell twice, every hallway, every locked door. The terminal listed until Mother's Milk finally raised a hand and said, "That's the last of them. Everybody's out." Only then did Peter follow the crowd through the broken fence. Across the city, inside a tower with a 7-pointed star carved into its face, Homelander watched the footage loop his soldiers thrown through armor plating his execution squad disarmed without a single death and a crowd already chanting a name he'd never heard before. He put his fist through the monitor. Sister Sage didn't flinch. "That's not the problem," she said, watching sparks fall from the shattered screen. "The problem is they just watched someone save them without asking for anything back. So, what do we do about him?" Homelander's voice was flat cold. Sage stayed quiet a moment longer, still watching the frozen frame on the wall, 4 steel arms, a torn gate, and a crowd finally standing up straight. "We find out what he's made of," she said, "before he finds out what we are." By morning, Firecracker had a name to attach to the footage. She stood in front of a studio audience, painted on a smile, and called the man in red and blue an alien, a foreign weapon, a terrorist who had stormed a federal facility and dragged dangerous criminals out into the streets. The network cut the clip so the rifles pointed at Peter instead of the prisoners. Nobody watching at home saw the kneeling line or the cameras set up for an execution. "He assaulted our brave men in uniform," Firecracker said, and Vought will not stand for it. In the tower, Homelander wanted to go find him that afternoon. We don't even know what he's capable of, Sister Sage said, blocking the elevator with nothing but her voice. You saw the same footage I did. 4 arms, some kind of woven polymer reflexes that beat gunfire. Walking in blind gets you hurt, and it gets him a second win on camera. So we do nothing. We watch. We learn what breaks him before you put your hands anywhere near him. Homelander didn't answer. He turned back toward the window, jaw tight, and let her have the point for now. Peter didn't have that luxury. He'd used most of his cartridges clearing the camp, and the fluid inside them wasn't going to refill itself. Huey found the location on a supply manifest lifted from the camp's terminal, a Vought research annex, 2 hours north, listed under polymer development. It's guarded, Mother's Milk said, spreading a printout across the table. Not camp-level guarded, real guarded. Good, Peter said. I need the good stuff anyway. He went in alone before sunrise, over a fence lined with motion sensors he'd already mapped from the roof. A patrol of 6 dropped without noise, webbed at the ankles, and stacked against a loading dock before the second guard finished his sentence. A drone swept the perimeter a minute later. Peter caught it out of the air, rerouted its camera feed through his own gauntlet, and let it keep flying, so the control room saw nothing wrong for 4 more minutes. Inside, 3 guards with reinforced skin tried to box him into a corridor. Wrong hallway, Peter said, and put 2 of them through a supply rack before they'd finished forming the wall. The third came in low, fast enough to blur, and Peter let the spider sense do the timing a half step, left a hand on the man's collar, and the guard's own momentum carried him headfirst into a bank of lockers. By the time an alarm finally caught up to him, Peter already had the lab-isolated doors sealed from the inside cameras, looping old footage instead of live feed. Frenchie arrived 20 minutes later through a service tunnel Huey had mapped from old blueprints, and together they went through cabinet after cabinet of raw compound. This one is heat-treated, Frenchie said, holding up a sealed vial. This one, I don't know what it does. Do not shake it. Noted, Peter said, already running the base solvent through a portable centrifuge he'd rigged from lab equipment. He mixed through the morning a heat-stable strand that wouldn't burn through under a plasma cutter, a version that carried no charge so it wouldn't conduct a shock back up his own arm, and a high-tech compound thick enough to pin something with real strength before it could tear free. He filled every spare cartridge twice over and packed a reserve case for the truck outside. Mother's Milk wasn't happy when Peter got back. You can't keep doing solo jobs like that, he said. One camera catches your face at the wrong angle, and every safe house we've got gets burned. Nobody saw my face, Peter said. And there are still active camps out there. I'm not sitting on my hands while people are strapped to chairs somewhere else. I didn't say sit on your hands. I said tell somebody before you go. Peter didn't have a clean answer for that one. He just nodded once and let it sit. Back at Vought Tower, Sister Sage reviewed the raid footage from 3 angles the control room had managed to salvage grainy partial, but enough. She watched Peter isolate the lab before backup could respond. She watched him move through 3 guards without slowing down and pull a drone out of the sky without breaking stride. Ambush tactics are wasted on him, she told Homelander. He clears rooms faster than we can fill them, and he hasn't killed anyone we've sent. So hit him with someone stronger. Strength isn't the problem. Sage set the footage to loop on a still frame, Peter's hand closing around the drone gentle enough not to crush the housing. He protects things he doesn't need to protect. That's not a weakness you punch through. Soldier Boy wanted a reason to move, and Peter gave him the only one that would land. Homelander's the one they put on billboards now, Peter said. The one people ask for autographs from. The one who replaced everything you used to be. Something in Soldier Boy's expression flattened out colder than anger. Nobody replaces me. Then prove it. Help me put him down. Soldier Boy agreed for reasons that had nothing to do with rescuing anyone, and Peter treated the agreement exactly like what it was alone due to be called in at the worst possible moment. Back at the lab, the planning moved fast. Frenchie pulled the maintenance records for the old containment chamber and ran the gas composition through a portable analyzer. Sedative aerosolized triggered through the vents. Old, but it still works if the mixture is fresh. Huey spread a stolen blueprint across the table, tracing corridors with one finger. Steel doors on every checkpoint between here and the tower's sublevel. Backup power on its own grid separate from the main building. And this, Mother's Milk said, tapping a section, shaded in gray, is lined with something that blocks X-ray. Whatever Vought used to keep Homelander from staring straight through the walls and finding him early. Peter took the blueprint and started marking 2 separate paths through the wiring. "One line runs through Vought's main server," he said. "Loud, easy to find, exactly the kind of thing Sage would expect from us. The other one's hardwired straight into my suit. No server, no signal she can hijack. If she takes the first line, she gets nothing but a dead end." "And if she doesn't take the bait," Huey asked, "then I've got a second way to seal every door in that building without asking anyone's permission." Mother's Milk built the evacuation plan around Peter's timeline. Civilians clear first, Vought staff second. Everyone routed away from the sublevel before the real fighting started. Nobody argued the order. Soldier Boy didn't sit through any of it quietly. 2 nights before the plan was set to move, he broke through the door of his holding room and went looking for the last of the guards, still cleaning up after the raid at men who'd already surrendered hands, raised weapons on the ground. Peter caught the alarm through his suit's feed and got there before the first punch landed. "Stand down," Peter said, dropping between Soldier Boy and the guards. "Get out of my way. They already gave up. There's nothing left to prove here." Soldier Boy swung anyway, a blow that could have leveled a wall, and Peter let the impact glance off a raised mechanical arm instead of taking it clean. He didn't trade blows after that. He hit the nearest door control, and steel slammed down between Soldier Boy and the corridor a half-second later, sealing the room shut. Vents hissed along the ceiling. Soldier Boy drove a fist through the wall. Twice cracked, concrete tore a support beam half loose and slowed with every breath, the sedative working faster than his rage could burn it off. By the time his knees hit the floor, the fight had already left him. Peter watched through the camera feed until the room went still, then keyed the release and pulled him back into restraints built for exactly this. "Test run," Peter told him once he came around, groggy wrists secured. "Next time it won't be a warning." Soldier Boy said nothing, jaw tight, and the silence carried more threat in it than anything he could have shouted. By the night, the plan finally locked into place. Every piece sat where it needed to be. Peter stood at the edge of the rooftop with the tower lit up in the distance, its 7-pointed star burning against the dark. "Civilians out first," he said. "Then Vaught's people. Then we go for him." Nobody in the group offered a different order. 3 floors beneath Vought Tower, in a server room. Nobody outside her staff was supposed to know existed. Sister Sage found the decoy line exactly where Peter had left it for her, flagged loud and impossible to miss. She smiled at the screen, like she'd already won. Peter triggered the fire alarm at the base of Vought Tower before he touched a single door. Employees streamed for the stairwells in the confusion that followed Annie and Huey, herding them toward the exits, while Frenchie held the loading dock clear. Mother's Milk worked the ground floor radio, calling out which stairwells were jammed and which ones ran open all the way to street level. A train tore through 3 floors in under a minute, scooping up stragglers too slow to reach the stairs and setting them down outside. Before most of them registered, they'd moved at all. Peter checked the upper floors through a borrowed maintenance feed, waited until the numbers thinned to almost nothing, and only then went through the front doors instead of a window. The lobby met him with a wall of security guards in riot gear, a dozen low-tier soups stationed behind reinforced glass drones circling the atrium ceiling. 4 mechanical arms opened at once, and the floor became 4 separate fights running in parallel. One guard with skin like poured concrete tried to plant himself as a wall. Peter hooked a line around his ankle, yanked his balance sideways, and let the man's own weight crack the barricade he'd been standing behind. Another soupe crackled with static down both arms. Peter's webbing carried no charge, and the current died the instant it hit the strands wrapped around his wrists. A third came in with raw strength and nothing else swinging wide. Peter caught the momentum on a mechanical arm and sent him through a marble pillar meant to survive far worse. Gunfire chased him across the lobby, and web after web found trigger guards and gun barrels before a single round cleared its chamber. A drone swarm dropped from the ceiling in a tight formation. Peter fired a wide net, upward, tangling 4 rotors together in one pass, and the rest scattered into the walls, trying to avoid the wreckage falling around them. Black Noir found him on the 14th floor. He came in silent blades, drawn faster than the lobby guards by a wide margin. Peter met the first 2 strikes on a raised arm and used the third to redirect him into a bank of elevator doors, steel buckling around his shoulders. Noir tore free and came again, and this time Peter didn't wait for an opening. He closed the distance first, drove both of Noir's wrists together, and sealed them behind his back before the blade could clear its sheath a second time. "We already did this dance once," Peter said, hoisting him against a support column. Noir said nothing, same as always, and stopped struggling only once the webbing locked tight. The Deep tried a different floor entirely, slipping toward a service elevator with his collar pulled up over his gills. Peter caught him 3 steps from the doors and pinned him to the wall with a single thick band across the chest. "Building's on fire," Peter said. "Nobody's taking the elevator anywhere." Firecracker was still filming when Peter reached the 20th floor mid-sentence, insisting to a dwindling camera crew that Vought had already contained the situation. Peter webbed the camera to the tripod, then webbed both of them to a support beam together, lens still pointed at her own face. "Actually," Peter said, "you're about to get a much better story." He kept moving floor after floor, clearing rooms faster than backup could reach them, and every hallway told the same story. Soldiers webbed to walls, low-tier soups stacked against elevator banks, drones tangled in their own rotors. 3 levels down in a server room she'd claimed as her own Sister Sage watched the decoy control line light up on her screen and pulled every override she had. The screen reported every door in the sub-level swinging open. Outside, nothing moved. The corridors stayed sealed silent, waiting on a signal that was never going to reach them from her terminal. Above her, the fight kept climbing. By the time Peter reached the top floor, most of Vought Tower had already gone quiet behind him. Guards restrained soups contained civilians, long gone. The building's own alarms, the only sound left echoing through the halls. He stepped out onto the observation deck glass walls, wrapping the city in every direction, and found it empty except for the wind. Then the ceiling tore open above him, and Homelander dropped through the gap without a word of warning, eyes already burning white. The spider sense screamed a half-second ahead of the beam, and Peter threw himself sideways off the observation deck rail. Heat split the air where he'd been standing, and the wall behind him buckled into slag glass, raining down onto the street 14 stories below. Outside the tower, a crowd already gathering at the police barricades looked up and saw 2 figures locked against the skyline, one in red and blue, one in a flag stitched wrong on purpose. Neither one backing down. Homelander came in fast. No wind-up, no warning shot, just heat and mass, closing the distance in the time it took to blink. Peter met the first pass by not being there. He dropped off the observation deck rail, caught a window ledge 2 stories down, and used the swing to put himself back above Homelander's blind spot before the beam finished carving a scar across the glass. "Hold still," Homelander said, banking hard through the gap he'd made, working on it. A web line caught him across the eyes. On the next pass, thin and dark gone before his hand could reach it. He tore it free half a second too late. The beam meant for Peter's chest went wide, instead punching through the tower's own signage 3 stories up, letters raining down onto the plaza below in burning chunks. Peter kept moving, using the building itself as cover, bouncing corner to corner, while Homelander tracked him by instinct more than sight. A mechanical arm caught Homelander's wrist mid-strike and wrenched the angle sideways just enough to send the next beam into a satellite dish instead of a crowd of onlookers gathered at street level. Homelander wrenched free and came again faster, angrier, driving Peter back across the exterior of the tower in a running exchange that peeled sheets of glass and steel loose with every near miss. "You're not even trying to save anyone," Peter said, vaulting a strike aimed at his skull. "You're trying to land one hit people can watch. I don't need your permission to enjoy this. That's the problem. You never needed a reason." Homelander's fist caved in a support column instead of Peter's ribs, and the tower groaned under the impact. A dozen Vought soldiers scrambled clear of the collapsing scaffolding below, and Peter peeled off mid-dodge to drag 2 of them out from under a falling girder before it landed. "Careful," Peter said, setting them down on a stable ledge. He's not exactly watching where that lands. Homelander used the opening to close the gap, catching Peter's shoulder hard enough to crack a mechanical joint and send him tumbling across the rooftop garden 3 levels down. Peter rolled through a bed of ornamental steel planters and came up already moving one arm, sparking the other 3 still fully operational. "That one actually landed," Homelander said, drifting down after him. Smile stretched thin. "Congratulations. You hit someone who wasn't trying to hurt you back." The words caught Homelander somewhere he didn't expect, and his expression flattened into something colder than the smile had been. Peter used the half-second to put distance between them, drawing him away from the crowd still gathered at the barricades and toward the tower's lower levels, where a stairwell led down into the parts of the building nobody outside Vought had ever mapped. "Running now," Homelander called after him, chasing the sound of impact through 3 collapsed walls. "Following you," Peter said. "You're the one who can't stop." He led him down through a maintenance corridor lined with panels Vought had once used to keep prying eyes out of a very different cell deep enough that daylight stopped reaching the walls. Homelander barreled after him, without slowing, confident the building would give way before Peter did. At the center of a reinforced chamber, Peter finally stopped moving. This is it. This is your big finish. Homelander landed in the doorway, cracking his neck to one side. Zuck. I was hoping for more of a fight. You'll get one. Behind him in the dark, at the chamber's far end, something enormous shifted its weight and rose to its feet. Soldier Boy stepped out of the dark, already moving. Homelander turned toward him, confusion flickering across his face for the first time since he'd broken through the ceiling upstairs. You're supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be a lot of things, Soldier Boy said. Nobody asked me first. Peter cleared the doorway behind him and slammed his palm against a hidden panel. Steel doors dropped from the ceiling in a ring around the chamber, sealing all three of them inside before Homelander finished turning to look at the exit. What did you do? Homelander said. Gave you a fair fight for once, Peter said. Try not to waste it. Soldier Boy didn't wait for an introduction. He drove a fist into Homelander's chest, hard enough to buckle the reinforced floor beneath them both, and light began pouring out of every crack in his skin, gold and violent, climbing towards something neither of them looked ready to survive. Get down, Peter shouted, and dove for the nearest support column. The blast filled the chamber white. When the light dropped away, Homelander was on his knees, breathing hard. One hand pressed against his own chest like he'd lost something he couldn't name yet. He looked up, eyes dull instead of burning, and tried to push off the ground. He didn't rise more than an inch before his arms gave out. No, Homelander said, staring at his own hands. No. Peter crossed the chamber and webbed both wrists behind his back before Homelander found the strength to try again. It's over. Get them off me. Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are. That's the problem. Soldier Boy stood over him, chest still smoking faintly, and reached for his throat. My turn. Peter stepped between them. He can't hurt anyone anymore. You're done. He took my legacy. I'm owed this. He's not stronger than you right now. He's not stronger than anyone right now. Killing a man on his knees isn't a legacy. It's just murder with better lighting. Soldier Boy's hand hovered a long moment close enough that Peter didn't move, didn't blink, held the space between them, like it was the only thing keeping the chamber from tipping into something none of them could take back. Then Soldier Boy lowered his fist. Peter didn't wait to see if the decision would hold. He hit the panel a second time, and the walls that had blocked Homelander's sight for decades sealed shut around Soldier Boy instead, gas already hissing through the vents. That's twice now, Soldier Boy said, voice already slowing. Third time I stopped being polite about it. He carried Homelander out through the corridor alone, past the ring of steel doors, and up into daylight, where cameras that had been filming the fight from the plaza turned as one toward the man who could no longer fly. Huey and Frenchie released everything within the hour. Freedom Camp footage, experiment logs, records of children dosed with Compound 5. Before they were old enough to understand what it meant, years of deaths Vought had scrubbed from every report that ever left the building. The response wasn't clean. Some outlets called the footage staged. Vaught's surviving board members rebranded within the week, insisting they had been victims of Homelander's decisions rather than architects of them. Knockoff versions of Peter's suit appeared in stores days later, stitched wrong, sold at a markup. Someone at Vought Legal filed paperwork trying to claim the spider emblem as a company trademark. Peter tore the resulting billboard down with one clean pull of webbing, the words "Vought stands with true heroes" crumpling into the gutter below. A reporter caught him before he could leave the scene, microphone half raised. Some people are already calling you the next face of this country. Is that a role you're stepping into? I didn't come here to replace anybody, Peter said. I came because people were getting hurt and somebody needed to stop it. He fired a line toward the nearest rooftop and was gone before she could ask a follow-up. Homelander went into a cell built for ordinary men, and the harshest part of the sentence wasn't the walls. It was that nobody outside them was afraid of him anymore. Sister Sage vanished. Before the tower's staff finished being processed, no trace left behind, but an empty office and a wiped terminal, a loose thread nobody had managed to pull yet. Butcher survived virus, destroyed gratitude, nowhere in him for it. Sam, free of Kate's orders, still needed someone watching his shoulder for a long while after. The Deep in Black Noir went into custody within days, and Annie kept working through what remained of Vaught's machinery long after the cameras stopped caring. None of it fixed everything at once, and nobody Peter worked with pretended it would. A week later, a convoy of unmarked trucks rolled out of a Vought loading dock before sunrise prisoners chained in rows along both walls headed for a facility that had never made it onto any public record. The roof of the lead truck tore free without warning, metal peeling back like a lid. Peter looked down at the row of startled faces staring up at him. "All right," he said. "Who wants to explain first?" He dropped into the truck before anyone answered.